In this video, I want to share with you something that I've learned from studying a lot of successful people who have made a lot of wealth. So, what they do and how they keep themselves rich, because guess what? A lot of these people who get rich, they also have to deal with a lot of dangers of losing that money as well. And some of them are worried to death about it. Others, they understand it. Maybe they've been burned in the past, they've screwed up on business deals, and they've learned from this. Many have lost tons of money, but they've all learned this strategy I've observed and I'm going to share with you. And the basic idea is that when you're trying to obtain wealth, a lot of people don't understand that if you spend it on things that rust, rot, or depreciate, it's just going to go to zero. So let's say you buy a $50 pair of shoes. That's going to just deteriorate until it's worth $0. But people who make money, they spend it on things that make them more money. They reinvest it back. So what's shocking though is understanding it on a higher level. So what I've seen from people like Warren Buffett or a lot of other entrepreneurs like Ryan Lee, he's a fitness entrepreneur, um, and Tony Robbins and his finance book, is that a lot of the successful people who have wealth, first off, they stay within their realm of knowledge. And they learn, some of them learned this the hard way because they strayed outside of this and they got screwed. So what I mean by that is, let's say you made your money trying to sell oranges. So you're like a fruits guy. You sell fruit at a store and somehow you made a ton of money from that. Let's say $100,000. The dumb person who's first starting out, he'll spend that first $100,000 he made and celebrate and spend all of it. Usually it's not even 100,000. It's like their first $500 that they made from their first business. They'll get excited and then they'll spend it on a pair of shoes or 10 pairs of shoes. And that goes to zero and they've just blown all their cash. Someone who's a bit smarter, what they'll do is they'll take that money and they'll dump it back into something that they know will make them even more money. So let's say they put in $100 to get the fruit stand going. Maybe it's a lemonade stand. And they're selling lemonade. And then they made $500. So now they're like, this is interesting. What if I do this every week and I buy 2 lemonade stands? And he takes that money that he just made, he puts it back in, and then now he made $1,000. So you can get this, you get the idea. By reinvesting constantly, you're growing your money, boom, 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 until you're making a lot more. And then the second thing is staying in your realm of knowledge. Warren Buffett calls it your circle of competence. So a lot of people, let's say they made their money with a video game blog. Let's say they made their money playing a video game like Call of Duty. They have a Call of Duty blog and they made their money from ads that show up on the sidebar of their blog, for instance. So what they understand is the blogging world and how to blog well and what you have to spend in the blogging world that's worth your money and so forth. So sometimes people will make this mistake and learn the hard way. What that blogger would do would be they would screw around and some of them will get cocky or arrogant. So they're like, you know what? Because I made $500,000 in blogging, that means I'm good at everything in life. So then he takes all of that money, $500,000, and he puts it into the stock market, something he doesn't understand at all, or maybe something he spent 20 minutes or maybe even a full day or a full week learning, and then he loses it all. James Altucher actually did this very similar thing. He didn't do it with a blog. He made his money by selling like a company, and it had nothing to do with stock market stuff. not really. And then he put it all into tech stocks, and that went to zero. And he lost $10 million from that. And there's tons of stories like this. There's this book called What I Learned from Losing $1 Million. And there's a saying, it's not always true because some people who make that money, they're smart with it. But there's a saying that goes that your first million is the hardest because you're most likely going to lose it and learn next how to keep that money you made. So the basic idea is very simple. Rather than just blowing it, especially when you're starting off, you reinvest it into what you know and you stay within what you know. And there's tons of stories about this. There's Ryan Lee, he was a fitness entrepreneur. He made a ton of money. And then his neighbor told him about, these hot stock tips and how he worked in the stock market and how this is a guaranteed winner and he's an insider. So Ryan Lee fell for this and he put in $40,000. A week later, that went to zero. And if you know anything about human psychology, what human psychology says is that the amount of money you lose is you feel it like 3 or 4 times greater, sometimes 10 times greater than gaining that same amount of money. And I think it's because we evolved to be like that from prehistoric times, because a loss meant grave consequences for us as opposed to a gain. So we have a much more heightened response to losing a lot of money. So unfortunately, a ton of people will never watch this video. Even fewer will actually take this advice. But the ones who do may just have saved themselves from a lot of heartache. So how exactly do you go about expanding that realm of knowledge? Or when can you step outside of that? I think the people who do it well, they're the ones who really do their homework. They will spend years, not months, not weeks. They will spend years researching something, learning more about it, because they know how hard it was for them to master how they made their money in the first place. It's not easy becoming an expert at whatever business. It may take years, and they know how tough it is and how many false information is out there. So they're very careful with expanding their knowledge into other areas and making sure they've done their due diligence before spending a ton of money there. And a lot of them will test. So they'll just spend a little bit of money in other areas just to get the ball rolling, just to see the return before they go crazy or they're too forward and they plow millions of dollars into something and risk that. So I think it's a very interesting concept. And I think as it illustrates, it shows that a lot of people who make a lot of money, millions, they still have a lot to learn in terms of keeping that money. Their next step is keeping it and growing it. And that's another whole level of education, which some of them have to learn the hard way. So I just wanted to share that story with you. The other big thing I've seen from a lot of wealthy people is that once they get wealthy, other than just not screwing themselves over by doing that, they also screw themselves over in the sense that some of them will spend much more than they make. And it's so simple, it's common sense, and yet so many people don't do it. Khan Mirza, he made hundreds of millions of dollars, and it took him decades. And it took him 12 failed companies, 12 or 13, I believe. And after all of that, he never really learned about financial knowledge in terms of financial education. So he spent more than he made. And what happens is when you keep spending more than you make, eventually you hit zero and then you go into debt. So he learned the hard way as well. So I think it's really, really useful for you to at least get a handle on this, because you don't need to become exceptionally wealthy to start using these things. And that's frankly what a lot of people who are poor or average, they don't really do well either. They will go into massive credit card debt by spending on all sorts of stuff that they probably don't need, and it's much more than they make. And so if you don't cut that habit now, how are you supposed to cut it way down the line? So for beginners, my recommended readings, which go into a lot more a lot more depth about all this, uh, is Money Master the Game by Tony Robbins. It's a, you know, all-in-one guide to investing for intermediate individuals. As far as beginners who have problems with debt, read the book uh, Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey, and that's who I would refer you to. I'm really not the debt eliminator guy. That would be Dave Ramsey. He's written like 10 books on it. Another great book that you might want to consider reading is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. That's more of a financial and wealth creation book. However, if you want a book on simply understanding the basics of financial education, I recommend three. And again, they're very short reads. I would say they're about this thin, and the audiobook's about like a couple hours. The first one is by Robert Kiyosaki, and again, all these will be linked in the description of this video. However, the first one's by Robert Kiyosaki, and it's called Rich Dad Poor Dad. The second one is called The Automatic Millionaire, and it seems kind of cheesy, the title, but it's a good book. And then the third one is on it. This one's a little bit deeper. So the first two are more beginner type books. The third one is called The Thin Green Line, and that one's fairly good. It's a very intermediate book. I think Tony Robbins' book is a lot more dense and deep, and I think it goes way too in depth for most people. So check out The Thin Green Line. And then if you want like all of that condensed to the best points for people who really don't really understand the stock market or anything like that, and you just want the best points, I wrote an extensive article on that, which I will link in the video description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.